Welcome to the Daily Word, verse by verse. Grab your Bibles and follow along as we study the book of Revelation. Keep in mind, I'm using the Holman Christian Standard Bible, so if you're using a different translation, the read is different, but the message is the same. Okay, we're going to continue in our study. We are transitioning into the third section of the book. John was instructed to write what he had seen, the conquering Lord, the things that were, the message to the seven churches, and then he says, and then the things that will be hereafter. In chapters 5 of the book of Revelations, remember Jesus had prevailed to be the only one to take the scroll out of the hand of God. The scroll had 7 seals on it, and Jesus is preparing to unleash those 7 seals. And when we study the chapter 6, we'll see what those seals were. It's important to understand, however, what is going on. So prophetically, we are now at the 70th week of Daniel. Daniel's 70 weeks, excuse me, were a prophetic timeline, we say, where God said that they were a prophetic timeline about the people of Israel, the judgment of Israel, the bringing in of righteousness, and then to set up an everlasting kingdom. Now, it's important to understand that those 70 weeks concerning Israel, so that's prophetic timeline, is when the clock is running, okay, when when God is doing this thing with Israel. What is happening is that between week 69 and week 70, the clock stopped. And so the church age, God fit this church age into this period. It was the mystery that Paul said wasn't revealed in times previous. So it's important to understand that when we look at the picture of the world, the world's kingdoms, the image that Nebuchadnezzar saw, okay, they bring us up to the 70th week, right? And then Jesus is going to come and destroy the world's kingdoms. So that's where we're at. Now, it's important to understand that because in that 70th week, and we know that week hasn't began yet because the Antichrist is not around, right? The man of sin is not around. Verse 15, and this is Matthew chapter 24. In verse 15, he says, "So when you see the abomination that calls desolate, spoken by the prophet Daniel standing in the holy place, let the reader understand." Now, it's important because why? He's not talking to the church. And I'm going to point that out in a moment. We've kind of moved on past the church age. And the clock, this time period here that he's referring to, the prophetic time clock is now running again, this 70th week. So when you see this, by the way, we're on a 7-year countdown. So in other words, if you see this, if you're around here, by the way, whoa, because it's a very bad time as we're going to see. But if you're here when this happens, you know 7 years, Jesus is coming. Okay, this hasn't happened yet. And so all of these prophecy predictions that Jesus is coming or the end of the world, that's why all of them have failed to date. So he says, when you see the abomination. Now the abomination, during this 70th week, Daniel said, okay, remember this is the 70th week. He says that the man of sin is going to make a peace pact. And then in the middle of that week, he's going to break the peace pact. You know what? In fact, I want to read that because it's important to understand. It's so important as we move forward here. In verse 27, this is Daniel 9. In verse 21, he says, "He will make a firm covenant with many for a week. But in the middle of the week, meaning the 70th week, he will put a stop to sacrifice and offerings, and the abomination of desolation will be on the wing of the temple until the decree of destruction and poured out on the desolator." Now it's important. This man of sin will stop this, and this is what's called the abomination that makes desolation. This is what Jesus is referring to right here. The abomination that makes desolate. Let the reader understand. Boom. This is why we have this right here. So he says, the abomination that makes desolate. We know this hasn't happened. We know the 70th week hasn't happened. When the apostles kept asking Jesus, they asked him this in Acts 1, are you going to restore the kingdom of Israel at this time? This is what they were referring to. In other words, he says, don't worry about that. This hasn't happened. All right. So verse 16 says, then those in Judea must flee to the mountains. A man on the housetop must not come down to get his things out of the house. And the man in the field must not go back to get his clothes. Woe to the pregnant woman and nursing mothers in those days. Pray that your escape may not be in the winter, but on the Sabbath. Now, what does this have to do with the church? Absolutely nothing. But if you are a Jewish person living in Jerusalem at the time when this 70th week began and when this abomination, now notice it is called the abomination that makes desolations, because there's this huge slaughter against the Jewish people, this huge wrath. This is what he's saying right here, verse 21. For at that time there would be great tribulations, the kind that hadn't taken place from the beginning of the world unto now and never will again. Now we're going to see some of these great tribulations because God is also judging. And when we get into chapter 6, we're going to see all of this is going to come together. That what God is doing in chapter 6, right? The unleashing of the 7 seals, that's why it says great tribulation. But there's also this abomination that makes desolation. This, at the same time, the rule of this man of sin, that's this huge desolation against the people of Israel. Now verse 22 says, unless those days were limited, no one would survive. But those days will be limited because of the elect. Now the elect here is the children of Israel. That's what's in mind here. Verse 23, if anyone tells you, look, here is the Messiah over there, do not believe him. False messiahs and false prophets will arise and perform great signs and wonders and lead astray, if possible, even the elect. Now he says, if possible, but at the time, they won't be able to. Verse 29, take note, I've told you in advance. So if they tell you, look, he's in the wilderness, don't go out. Look, he's in the rooms, do not believe him. For if the lightning comes from the east and flashes the forest as the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. Wherever the carcass is, the vultures will be gathered. So again, how will we know Jesus is coming back? Anytime. And by the way, there are many people today who claim Jesus come back. And one of the failed prophecies, the Jehovah's Witnesses in 1914 said Jesus was coming back. And when he didn't come back, they said he came back in the spirit. In 1994, the same thing. There were people who claimed that Jesus was coming back in 1994, I believe it was. And then when he failed to come back, they said, oh, he came back in the spirit. Okay. But the idea is that, again, there have been people throughout time that always say, hey, Jesus is coming back. Quit your jobs. Empty your bank accounts. By the way, give me the money. Okay, that's the way, give me the money. So, but y'all don't understand why, if Jesus is coming back, why I got to give the pastor the money? I digress. But the idea is that you have people that will say, hey, quit your jobs. Excuse me. Move out in the field. Remember Y2K? People attach, again, an end times to that. There were false prophets who were prophesying that. Jesus said, you will know when I come. Remember, by the way, in chapter 1, he says, every eye will see him. There's no doubt about this. Remember, he said all of the events come to lead to Jesus coming back. Every eye is going to see him. There's no secret meetings, secret revelations, or anything. Every eye will see him. And since that happened, Jesus hasn't come back. Now, even the events that come up, we know that these things haven't happened. Verse 29, immediately after the tribulation of those days, for the 70th week, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not shed its light, but the stars will fall from the sky, and the celestial powers will be shaken. Then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky, and then all of the people of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. He will send out his angels with a loud trumpet, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of the sky to the other. Now learn the parable of the fig tree. As soon as its branch becomes tender and sprout leaves, you know that summer is near. In the same way, when you see all these things, recognize that he is near, even at the door. I assure you, this generation will certainly not pass until all these things take place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. Now, when he says, here's again, when all these things take place. Oftentimes people forget that phrase. Not some things, all things. All things he's listed, all things prophetically listed. Not just certain things that you think is going to happen. Here's a good example. In 1948, when Israel became a nation, people started counting the clock down. That was okay, even if you want to accept that, which I don't, but even if you want to accept that, that was only one sign. He said, "What all these things happen?" Verse 36, he says, "Now concerning the day and hour, no one knows, neither the angels or heaven or the Son, except the Father only." Now, I'm amazed with this statement. No one knows, but everybody figure out that God has given them special revelation. Verse 37, "As the days of Noah were, so the coming of the Son of Man will be. For in those days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, given in marriage, until the day Noah boarded the ark." Now, I'm going to stop right here, because I'm going to pick this up in the next video.